Hi, everyone. Welcome to Two Guys Talking Sports. And watch out, Chicken Little, the sky is falling for two teams that we cover.
I never in a million years would have thought the beginning of this season, Clemson would be under or right at 500 with a possibility of being under 500. South Carolina, I think everybody, had, kind of like the line set at 6 wins on the season, which is still technically attainable.
Right.
May not necessarily happen.
You thought that you would be closer to 6 wins at this point of the season.
Yeah, and we've said this previous weeks. Last year we won some games we weren't supposed to, and unfortunately, we're not winning those games this year.
This year we've lost some games that we should have won.
Correct, yeah.
It's kind of the reverse of last year as to how the season's going.
Yeah.
But let's talk Clemson first. They started out a national contender, as they always have been this year. I think they were ranked inside the top 10 coming into the season. And now they're sitting at 4-4, 500 on the year. They just lost their first back-to-back games in a decade, maybe.
This is their first 4-game losing season since 2011.
Yeah, and it's going to be more than that. They're going to at least lose one more game, most likely this week, if not 2 more games with North Carolina still on the schedule.
Yeah.
But they travel to...
No, they're at home.
No, I'm saying this week. They traveled to North Carolina State this past week.
Oh, yes.
And that's always a place that, even though they may have come out victorious in the games, they struggle to play there.
Yeah.
It's always close games. North Carolina State wins this game 24-17. Again, Cade Klubnik and the offense just continue to struggle. And it's tough to tell if it's not all on Cade, obviously.
No.
I think the play calling, unfortunately, they went out and got the best of the best, is what, was thought to be the best of the best.
Yeah.
And it hasn't shown as far as the play calling.
Clemson's kind of struggling with what the Gamecocks are struggling with. They just don't have a good offensive line. It's a struggle. It's been a struggle for them all season. Cade isn't. I don't think if you would have asked Clemson fans going into this season, they would have predicted they would have the season like they did after seeing what Cade did against North Carolina in the ACC championship game last year. He's clearly not very good right now.
Yeah. Well, one thing with that North Carolina game last year is nobody had really seen Cade.
No.
In spurts here and there, but they hadn't really seen him, so it was almost like throwing North Carolina just a complete wrinkle. And North Carolina's defense last year was not good.
They were statistically one of the worst defenses in the country. So him doing good or doing what he did in that game shouldn't have been a surprise to anybody.
No, it was a terrible defense versus a quarterback that they didn't know, and it was just kind of lined up to make Klubnik look a lot better than he truly is, because so far what we've seen this year has been a struggle.
Yeah, it's honestly what you've seen out of Clemson's offense the past 2 seasons.
Yeah.
And Dabo was talking about this in his post-game press conference on Saturday. I mean, if you just looked at their stats on defense gave up 202 yards.
Right. Yeah.
On paper, if you just look at that, don't look at anything else, you would think that team won.
Yeah, every single week, defense for Clemson is doing what they've done for a decade or more, and that's keep their team in the game, and the offense is just letting them down.
Yeah.
And, Dabo keeps talking about, we're a couple of fumbles away from being undefeated or this, that, and whatever.
I think he said about 8 plays or 8 fumbles away.
Yeah, if you look at this game, sure, they fumbled the ball, but they never lost possession of the ball. Even when they did fumble, they didn't lose those fumbles, so you still retain possession. Yeah, maybe it was, didn't help you on the drive, but it's not like it was a turnover.
Yeah.
They're just not scoring, and they're not moving the ball well.
Yeah, that pick 6 by Cade obviously wasn't very good. I started watching the game fully after our game ended Saturday, and it was just...
Yeah,
it's not
sloppy,
good. Yeah. And, honestly, like I said, the defense played really good for Clemson. They had one bad play where the DB, I think, missed the tackle, and unfortunately, there's just nobody else for Clemson to help, and it just led to a touchdown. Like I said, it's not like Clemson got dominated.
Yeah.
But when your offense can't get anything going, it's kind of like I said, it's kind of like what the situation the Gamecocks are in, where like one side of the ball usually does good and the other side isn't very good at all.
The other
that
thing
seems
is
to be the theme of the season for Clemson.
when you can't really move the ball, even though defense is only giving up 200 or so yards a game, the problem is the field position where teams are starting with great field position. So even though it's like they don't have to go far and they don't have to put up many yards to be able to score and take the lead and win the game. So that's kind of a tricky stat because, it makes the defense look good. And they are playing well.
Yeah.
It's just that you're putting them in bad positions because, A, you can't move the ball to score yourself, and then B, you're not winning the field position battle.
Yeah, and I don't think, I'm pretty sure the people who watch this, special teams can make or break games.
Yes.
You're seeing that helped South Carolina a lot last year.
It's hurt them
and we'll
this
talk
year.
about this more when we recap that game. But field position is a big deal when
another thing for Clemson too is like once they do move the ball and they get into what would be scoring territory, they don't fully trust their kicker to make the kicks because he hasn't been consistent. And they've gone through a kicking battle throughout the year. They pulled an insurance guy, out of his. He was about to go work full time, I think, in New York.
Yep.
Pulled him off his couch and said, "Hey, come kick." Set him up for this glorious, movie like storyline, and he completely misses the kick. But it's not going well in the upstate.
No. And people are upset. We'll talk about some more of their fans a little bit later on in the show. But I'm seeing a lot, like seeing message boards posts where they're just kind of, I think they're honestly more fed up with the assistant coaches than they are Dabo. Dabo's earned the right to try to right the ship, give, how many ever years you want to give them. But, and this is something we said about, South Carolina. It at the height of when South Carolina was good under Steve Spurrier, we had probably top to bottom one of the best assistant staffs in the country. And you could have said that about Clemson during their dominant run when they won the 2 national championships in 7 years.
Right.
It's all about who you replace them with. And clearly Dabo hasn't done.
Yeah, they had a good run where they had assistants that stayed with Clemson where, obviously Brent Venables could have left many times whenever he was the defense coordinator, but he decided to stick around.
Yep.
I think Tony Elliott,
same thing with him. Tony Elliott.
They both decided, hey, we're just going to stick. We got a good thing going here.
Yep.
Eventually those guys decided to leave, and then that's kind of when you've seen that trickle and go downhill.
Yeah.
And Dabo is not a play calling guy, offensively or defensively. He's never been a play caller. He's before, he was a head coach. Since he's been a head coach, he's never been, one to call the plays. He's more of the CEO type of head coach where he puts the people in the right positions.
Yeah.
It seems here recently that the guys that he's putting in those positions, he tried some in-house hires that didn't work out last year. He went outside of that, and so far it's not panned out the way that people thought it was going to be this year. So Clemson, Dabo, they've got to take a deep, hard look at themselves in the offseason here because, and we'll talk about it later, but Dabo keeps talking about appreciation versus expectation.
Yeah.
And that's fine 10 years ago. But at this point, you've created the expectation. Yeah. And so you can no longer get mad at fans for having those expectations.
Well, and also I think fans are a little, especially college football. We are passionate people when it comes to our college football.
And especially in the South.
And you just don't have the benefit of somebody, a university, giving you half a decade to build a program. It's, if they're not seeing, the product on the field that they expect after 4 years, they want you gone. And it's and he said this in it's either his midweek call, his post game press conference, or his call-in show on Mondays. I lost my train of thought on it. But it just, you don't have the luxury of getting time anymore.
Right, exactly. And especially with the amount of money that's put into college football. But we'll talk a little bit about Dabo a little bit later on.
Another big thing is Will Shipley going to be helpful this week?
That's tough because that's one person that they can't afford to lose. Obviously, they have Mafah, but they do better as a 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
Not to say neither one of them would be successful just on their own, but obviously the way that they're built is to get 15 or so carries apiece, somewhere in there. If you got to put it all on Mafah and then go to a third string back this week, and you're obviously taking on a pretty good team in Notre Dame, their
defense. Their
defense
is stout. They've lost 2 games this year. I think they're 5 or 6-2.
A good thing for Clemson is, I believe it is a home game for them this week. Another 12 o'clock game. Clemson seems to keep getting these 12 o'clock games. They finally started giving South Carolina. We don't have to wait all day to get for Daddy to give them.
Just go and get me pissed off early. Just go and get me pissed off.
Gives you the rest of the day to kind of relax or try and get over it. Clemson needs Will Shipley. Obviously, they're going to be real careful if it's a neck injury.
Yeah.
Ankles, stuff like that, you can kind of tough it out, but a neck injury is not something you want to play with, especially for a player of his caliber that's going to be playing on Sundays here in the future.
When they use him so much, they use him in different facets of the game. He's special teams.
Right.
They use him out of the backfield. He catches the ball out of the backfield.
Exactly.
I did see
he is the bright spot of their offense.
I did say he was in like a collar spine.
Right. That's not a good sign.
And it could just be a precaution.
Right.
It is, it's not something I would be overly concerned about just because they kind of probably do it as a precaution. But it's also something I don't think they're going to push him to try to come back. Right. And it changes the way I think Garrett Riley and maybe Dabo playing how they call the game, because I don't think Phil Mafah is that big a threat catching the ball like Will Shipley is.
No, Mafah's more of that between the tackles, inside run guy. He's not really your swing pass or your, get it out wide kind of guy. So it definitely changes how you do the offense. It's somebody they got to have. But again, if you're just personally as Will Shipley, and we talked about it last week with Caleb Williams sitting out, that situation a little bit different because there's nothing wrong with Caleb Williams to sit out a game.
Yeah.
If you're Will Shipley and you've got a potential neck injury or something like that, at this point you're 4-4. You're not going to play for the ACC championship game.
Nope.
You're not going to play for the national championship. Not to say, hey, let's sit out the rest of the year.
Yeah.
But let's not rush ourselves back.
Exactly.
Especially with a neck injury.
Yeah,
again, if it's an ankle that you can just wrap up tight, something like that, a shoulder, okay, but a neck injury is not on. I mean, that could be a life thing, that could change his entire life with a neck injury. So, and a good thing about Dabo and staff is they're not the ones to try and risk kids personally just to try and win a football game.
No, I think this was even when Trevor Lawrence was there. I know he had a concussion. That's not something you want to play with. And I think he could have played that week. I think it's when they played Syracuse.
Yep.
And they went with their backup.
Right. Yeah.
And you need to put the health of the player first. And, like I said, the season's not going the way they wanted it to.
Right.
I don't think that has too much of a a deciding factor. But it's also you don't want to risk it, because I didn't see it happening live because our game was still on. So I was watching that. And
it could have been a stinger or something like that, but those stingers, they're painful and they can last.
It was enough to keep him out of the game, so clearly it's something. It's not anything.
They're going to need him. If not, maybe it forces Riley's hand to do something different in the offense, and maybe that kind of benefits Clemson against Notre Dame. But I don't see it going very well for him this week.
No.
It is a very close game as far as the line, with Notre Dame being favored by 3.
Yeah.
I think – obviously Vegas thinks it's going to be a defensive game with 44.5 being the over-under. I'm not expecting an offensive onslaught between these two teams.
I was definitely going to, if we were able to legally bet in South Carolina, I would probably hammer the under.
Yeah, take that under.
Yeah.
But we'll talk a little bit more about that game at the end of the show. Let's jump into South Carolina. Another loss. They fall to 2-6 on the year.
Yep.
They travel down to Texas A&M. And honestly, at the beginning of the game, it looked a lot better on both sides of the ball, I would say. But more so for me, I think the defense played a lot better in the first half.
Yeah. Honestly, they didn't play bad in the second half.
Yeah.
It was the first quarter went as good as you could have wanted it to go.
I kept texting you. I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
Is this deep? Like, we're playing defense. What are we doing?
Still early.
Yeah.
Still early. And it kind of like Clemson, our offensive line just became a liability, especially in the second half with the intentional grounding calls. And we'll talk about this in another segment. Our special teams, the punter just let us. I'm not going to say let us down.
Yeah,
but
it's a factor.
And Beamer, somebody asked Beamer on, I think it's Sunday call, like teleconference. Somebody from the media said his job's not in jeopardy. But I read something where they want him to kick it higher to give the coverage team more time to get to the ball.
Right.
And why are we going to sacrifice that when you know he's capable of kicking it?
Yeah, just
50 yards.
Yeah.
And when you have the penalties like we did and you can't flip the field, that hurts the defense. I mean, it truly does. You can't. And when the offense couldn't stay on the field and the defense was going back out there after 4 plays, and they're already starting on our side of the field, I mean, what do you expect from them?
Yeah, special teams it can be a killer or it can be a game saver.
It was a game saver last year for us.
And I've heard Pat McAfee talk about it a lot, especially with him being a punter. It's kind of like having a yips. Like as soon as you start, it's definitely a mental thing. When, you know that you have the skill set to do it. And especially if they're asking you to do one thing, sometimes it's just better to say, hey, man, just go out there and bomb it. Kick it as far as you can kick it. If it goes for a touchback, fine. If we pin them at the 1, awesome. If not, let's stop trying to directional punt or do certain things at this point because he obviously needs some confidence. Yeah. And the thing about punting kicking is, well, a little bit better for us, but you're not going out there every play. No. It's not like a quarterback or a running back where you can get into the groove of the game. Yeah. If you go out there and you punt, you might not punt again for an hour or two, or you might not, or you could be right back out there, with South Carolina's offense sometimes, which offense hasn't been bad this year. So it's not like he's been out there as much as he was last year.
Yeah.
But that's one of those things where hey, let's just do something to give you some confidence. Grab the ball, kick it as far as you can, man. Yeah. Let's stop trying to worry about all these other things because it's obviously in his head because he has the talent. He was probably the best punter, top 3 punter in the nation last year. And this year it's just like, what is he doing?
Yeah, and I think it's just all special teams in general because there's I think it was his first punt of the game where we could have pinned him back pretty deep, and we couldn't get to the ball in time grab hold of it before it went in the end zone for a touchback. And that was Xavier Leggett. And I mean, I don't think he was 100%. I don't think he should have been playing. I mean, he's basically a non-factor. You could kind of tell he wasn't his best.
He even had a drop ball, and that's a mental thing where you don't fully trust your body, your health. That's one thing that he hasn't done all year is drop passes.
Yeah, exactly. But that's what plagued him last year.
Right.
And I know that was a big emphasis in the offseason. But again, I was more I don't like losing, but I think it was at the point like it was last year with our offense where they changed up the defensive play calling. And you have to. I mean, it clearly worked. Like, they're not going to stop them every down.
Exactly.
People were pissed off all over social media about the defense. And again, I don't know what else you expect from them. You get what you get with them. And
the thing is, too, is you weren't playing a slouch of a team.
No.
I mean, you're playing a team that they haven't been, overly successful, but they do have a lot of talent on the field.
They underachieve for what they have.
Right.
They put in that.
The other thing that they have that South Carolina doesn't right now is depth. They have a lot of depth where they can send out fresh guys on offense and defense, where South Carolina's, you're pretty much running out the same 11, 12, maybe 13 players, on offense and defense. And eventually those guys get gas. Spencer didn't play bad. I mean, 20 of 33 for 176 yards and a touchdown. Again, he had some costly grounding penalties, but that's just him running for his life and just trying not to take a sack.
Yeah, and I think he even said, Dow Loggins told him, don't. And it could be just a specific scenario that would happen, but he basically told him, try not to take sacks.
Right.
And I think there were guys that was supposed to be there, but the offensive line doesn't give enough time for the play to develop.
And they've, I know I'm not sure in college, but especially in the NFL, they've kind of tightened down on grounding calls this year where, maybe if a guy was 10 yards away, they would say, okay, well, he was in the area, where this year they're saying, okay, there's no way he was going to catch that pass.
Yeah.
He's not in the area.
In our situation, I don't think anybody
nobody was in the area. Some of us just, Spencer doesn't want to take a sack. He's trying his best to just get it down there. And when you're running, it's hard enough to throw the ball and then, try and get it in a certain area without it getting picked at the same time. That's tough.
But one thing, we did good at the beginning of the game is rolling him out of the pocket.
Right.
And, give credit to people that question him, like his leadership abilities, when he was at Oklahoma coming to South Carolina based off the Netflix documentary.
Yeah.
If you can't see how much of a leader he is
to
this team, Nicholas Harbor dropped the first pass was thrown to him. He went straight up to him. He's like, I'm coming back to you.
Right. And he did.
Yeah.
And Harbor had caught the pass.
And Beamer, I'm paraphrasing, was like, everybody messes up. Get over it. We got a lot of game left. I'm coming back to you, so get ready.
Exactly.
And he made up for it.
He's definitely grown as a player.
Yeah. He's having to. He's that kind of
yeah, just in as far as his leadership, he's gained a ton of experience. He's gained a lot of leadership qualities being in South Carolina. He's gained a lot of being able to throw on the run.
Yeah.
And he's shown NFL scouts that. Unfortunately, we're 2-6, but Rattler personally has, I think, boosted his draft potential.
I agree.
He's played extremely well this year. They know what he can do in the pocket. He's done extremely well in the pocket when he has time.
I would like us to roll him out more.
And I think the good thing is you're playing Jacksonville State this week, which isn't a slouch. They're 7-2.
Yeah.
But it's still a team that you should
on paper beat
do very well against. I think it bodes well because the defense did look a little bit better this week.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily show on the scoreboard, but you did see a lot of positives. It gives time for Xavier to get a little bit healthier. You got Harbor just playing a lot more snaps now. That's another positive to look at.
Yep.
Mario Anderson still looks good in the backfield whenever he has lanes to run in, and even when he doesn't, he's running the ball well.
When we got the ball going passing wise, especially in the second half, it opened up a ton of passing and running lanes for us.
Exactly. There was a lot of positives to take out of it. Obviously, losing always sucks, but it was a different loss than what it had been the past few weeks, where it was just an abysmal defensive performance.
Yeah,
they didn't play amazing, but they played better. It looks like, I'm not sure. They said this last year with Satterfield that somebody else was helping with play calling when it got to those Tennessee and Clemson games, and towards the end of the year when we kind of looked better on offense. People are saying the same thing with defense, and maybe other people are assisting in the offense. The defensive play calling, that whatever makes it work.
But I can't imagine. I feel like, as somebody that's never coached, didn't play collegiate ball, but I can't imagine there's a lot of similarities between calling defensive plays compared to offensive plays.
No, it's completely different for sure.
I know I think they said we ran a lot of man, which clearly helps because when you've got a majority freshmen or sophomores in the backside of your defense,
right,
it can get confusing.
Well, the other thing is when you're playing zone, and especially for us, is you're taking a safety who's now, when he does play zone, he's used to playing this zone and playing this type of way. Just don't let him behind you type of thing. Where you're putting him at corner, where now it's like, all right, you got to keep him in front. You also got to play the guys behind.
Yeah.
It does get a little bit difficult for a guy who's played a certain way, his entire career. It's a lot easier to say, that's your man, stick with your man.
Yeah.
So sometimes it can hurt you playing man-to-man just because you can get burnt. But also for where we're sitting right now with the players that we're having to play at certain positions, it's definitely a lot more beneficial to just take the confusion out of it, take the thinking out of it, and just say, see man, cover man.
Yeah. And our D-line got pressure on the quarterback.
Right. And that helps because when quarterbacks just aren't seeing zone breakdowns and being able to just pick your zone apart, and you have a guy that's on him or close to him playing man, that gives that defensive line more time to get to him. And Texas A&M's offensive line is probably one of the best in the SEC. They've got big-time guys on there.
They recruit,
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So to see them be able to get pressure and stuff, the defense looked a lot better.
Yeah.
You've got 1-2 games that you should be able to improve each week where the competition isn't Texas A&M, Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, those type of teams.
On paper, we're the better. The next two games on paper, we're the better teams.
So you got those two games where you should win. You should be 4-6 going into that Kentucky game. Again, we play better at home.
Yeah.
Kentucky's been kind of hit or miss. If you can build some confidence with these next two games, get a scheme of defense that works for you.
Yeah.
Try and get some guys healthy by being able to play some younger guys, especially in this Jacksonville State game.
Yeah.
Give some other guys some time to get healthy. You go in that Kentucky game, and maybe if you can, roll off 3 in a row, there's a good chance that the South Carolina Clemson game could determine who goes to a bowl this year.
I was seeing a bunch of stuff they were talking about. They need to bring back Jefferson Pilot Sports to air the South Carolina Clemson game, because between both programs, you haven't seen us kind of struggling the way both teams are this year. But yeah, I'm optimistic about this weekend. I was optimistic about the game Saturday.
Yeah.
Saw a lot of bright spots we can build off of. Hopefully, we can continue to do that.
Yeah.
Maybe we've called up Michigan to see if they'll help us a little bit.
I think that Texas A&M game was similar to the Georgia game, where we knew we probably weren't going to win.
Yeah.
But I think that we played better than what I expected going into it, especially defensively. Unfortunately, offensively, it's not even talent, it's just injuries at this point.
I think we've had a different offensive line
every single game.
Every game.
Yeah. And it was getting better when they were healthy, but just figuring out who played best where.
Yeah.
The offensive line was looking better.
Yeah.
Because they looked great in the Florida game. They were looking better each week, and then once they started looking better, then you got injuries.
Yeah, and I was listening to Mike Yuva's call-in show after the game Saturday night, and people were obviously upset, saying the strength and conditioning needs to be addressed. And he was bringing it up from the standpoint of he would understand that if it was the same injuries that just plague the team, where if it's like a sprained ankle or it's like a knee, like soft tissue injuries. But it's just different freak injuries. There's just sometimes you can't prevent certain things from happening.
Yeah.
No matter
the injuries, it's not a training thing. I don't think it's we don't have much depth kind of thing. Offensive line is one thing, because those you want to run out the same 5 every single time.
Yep.
Defensively, you can move in and out defensive line, linebackers, defensive backs. So when you get those kind of injuries, if you have a really in-depth team or a really deep team, and you see those injuries, then you can start looking at training. But when you're running out the same guys over and over, it turns into just be a body wearing down thing.
Yeah.
And you can't condition to just play that many snaps every single game,
especially
for 12
when
games.
And you're staying on the field as a defense. Compared to, there was one drive, I think it was a damn good drive where we ended up scoring. And it gave, it was plenty, it gave the defense so much rest. And that's such a game changer.
The problem is you have a hurt offensive line where you can't sustain long drives, and then you banged up, tired defense. Again, I think these next 2 weeks, they come at a really good time for a team that's trying to make that late season push to salvage a season, because you have this Jacksonville State game that comes at a very opportune time.
Correct. Yeah.
And then
try to build some momentum.
Right. And then you take that into Vanderbilt, which is a team you should beat, a little bit tougher than Jacksonville. So it's almost like you can not really take a breath, but you can try and build some momentum.
Yeah.
Slowly up the level of competition.
Yeah.
Slowly up the level of competition again with Kentucky.
Yep.
Potentially win that game, and then play a home game against Clemson to try and get into a bowl game. And if you finish out 6-6, the way the season started, and as much criticism as Beamer's gotten for the first half of the season, if he can do what he did last year and have a crazy ending to the season, it's going to build some more hype to where he can finally start getting in the depth with the recruiting that he's getting in.
It's coming. He's got the recruiting classes coming.
Yeah, the depth is coming.
Yeah.
You just got to be able to keep them. You got to be able to keep building the hype around the program. So I think if he can, it ain't always how you start. It's how you finish.
Exactly.
If you can finish off these last 4 weeks and you can roll out 4 wins and get into a bowl game, potentially win a bowl game, that would end up being a damn good season. Because like I said, the bar right now is 6 wins. That's where you should be this year.
And honestly, hell, dude, if we just finish with 5, I think considering everything that has happened the entire season, I think is when it sucks. I think 4 is okay. I don't want that, but at the end of the day, like I'm a realistic Gamecock fan, and we're not a 6-7 win team.
No. And I think that there's a very good chance we win 6 games. There's a good chance.
Yeah, it's
especially depending on how these next 2 weeks look, and then how you look against Kentucky.
I'm more concerned about Kentucky than anybody.
Right. That Kentucky game is going to play a big factor into the Clemson game, because if you go out there and lay an egg, just don't look good, spirits will be down both on the team and the fans' perspective. But if you roll off 2 here, you play very well against Kentucky and pick up a win then, and then more than likely, Clemson's not winning out.
Their offense doesn't scare me.
No.
Clemson's offense, at least.
The good thing is our defense is about as bad as Clemson's offense.
Agree. Yeah.
But like you said, for defense, you can simplify it. Just play man. And let's just man up, because the talent is there. It's just, unfortunately, on the back end of the defense, you're playing them in positions that they're not used to playing.
Yeah.
So just make it simple for them, cover man, and it'll look a lot better.
I'll be anxious to see about this weekend. Luckily, the next 2 games are afternoon games, 12 o'clock.
Another good thing about the next 2 weeks, especially this week for me, is you're going to have a chance to get some freshmen and younger guys in that probably haven't had a chance to play this year, just because you don't know what they're going to give you. Mm-hmm. But you got a chance to get them in there and see what they got to potentially give you a little bit more depth going into the back half of this season.
Yeah.
If you can get some guys in there, get them some experience against Jacksonville State, maybe some against Vanderbilt, use them a little bit against Kentucky, and then, have just a little bit more depth to help you out on both sides of the ball. You could make a little run to finish the season off decent. Well, 6-6 would be a great season.
Yeah.
No matter how you get there, just get to 6. That would be a great season. So they got a chance. Beamer's got a chance. He said that they've practiced extremely well this year. They took an approach this week where Carrion Joyner he looked at the guys and said, "Look, we've had enough hard times. Let's just find something to be happy about. Let's just find some joy." And then you got a dumbass like Chris Phillips who just wants to call him out because he might be the worst Gamecock fan of all time. He wants to make his life being a Gamecock show host and all this, but all he does is bash the team, bash the players, bash the coaches, baseball, football, basketball. That's all he does.
And then he'll try to spin it in a way when he did the stuff. Because Carrion Joyner tweeted at him and said "STFU."
Yeah,
I'm not going to say that,
right?
But I mean that's what he said. He just had the letters, and I just don't know how you tweet what you did and then try to spin it and say if you.
It wasn't an attack against him. Yes, it was. You quote tweeted him, or you took his quote, and then you said you can't find any joy in this season. Like you're talking about what he said.
Yep.
You didn't say. You might not have said, "Hey, DeCarrion's an idiot" or something like that, but you did. You called him out, and then when a player responds back to you, then you cower down. But that's what he's made his career off of that.
Let me find
Chris Phillips, you're an idiot.
Let's
make that a short, Zeb. Chris Phillips is an idiot.
Okay, so this
worst Gamecock fan of all time.
Okay, he quote tweeted when he said, "Okay, so this was DeCarrion's quote. I told our guys this morning, despite our record, find some joy. We've got 4 more games together. We have 3 more Tuesday practices after today. Time is coming to end after today. Enjoy being together." And then Spurs Up show. Put quotations. Find some joy in quotation marks. Then he put, "There's absolutely zero joy in losing."
Exactly.
Which is true. Like, nobody wants to lose.
There's zero joy in losing. But what DeCarrion is saying, hey, let's find some joy in where we're at.
Like, we can't dwell on the past. We can't dwell what's happened the first 8 games of the season.
Us looking back on how bad the first half of the season is not going to benefit us at all. So let's find the good things. Mm-hmm. Let's find some joy in being together, doing this together, because if you hate each other, you're not going to play together. Yeah. But if you can get out there and you can find love for each other and want to play for the guy beside you, you're going to play a lot better. But obviously, Chris Phillips doesn't understand that, and he wants to act like he's like this, college athlete great that he never was.
And he's not the only one like that.
No, he's not. But he's the loudest.
Yeah, he is. He gets a lot of heat, or that account gets a lot of heat.
Deservedly.
There's a lot of fans. There's a lot of Twitter accounts that I just happen to see on like the For You side on Twitter now, and it's all the same stuff, and it sounds exhausting.
Yeah.
Like they can't find. Not trying to take words out of DeCarrion's mouth. They can't find some joy.
Right.
Like it doesn't matter how good one side of your team played. There's still a negative.
Right.
And it's like, it's just, and this is in all of life, however you want to approach it.
Yeah.
If you're just always looking to find something wrong, that's a depressing way to live.
Yeah.
And that's a depressing way to be a fan. Like, yes, I want to win. I want to go 12-0. I want to make the national college football playoff. I want to make the SEC championship.
Yeah.
But you have to be realistic when you look at the type of team we are right now. And you can say that as a Clemson fan should approach it the same way.
Right.
Clemson clearly doesn't have the injury bug like we have this year.
Right.
But with where we're at, what's happened, what we've been dealt, you have to look at the positives and approach that for the remainder of the 4 games we have against the teams.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we've been critical of the coaches. We've been critical of some of the decisions. I try not to be critical of the players, but sometimes, they do things that aren't great.
Yeah.
But at this point, just like DeCarrion said, it's like, all right, focusing on all of that, that's not going to benefit us. So let's just find something. Let's just find the joy in where we are right now, and then let's move forward with that, and let's just see where we can go.
Is the Spurs Up show and Chris Phillips, are they the Tyler from Spartanburg for Clemson?
Yes. And speaking of Tyler from Spartanburg, Dabo's going through it right now.
Yeah.
He's having a tough go of it. It's been a long time since they've faced some adversity, and they faced criticism here and there over the past few years, but nothing like what's happening right now.
But this is the same guy Dabo's been his entire head coaching career.
Yeah.
Rewind back to when we had like our winning streak against Clemson of 5 games, and Spurrier knew how to get under Dabo. He had that big rant. I know the real USC's out in California. The only real Carolina I know is in Chapel Hill.
Right.
Like he clearly he's a very emotional guy.
Yeah.
And he wears it on his sleeve. I agreed with everything he said to that caller for like the first 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's where he lost me.
Yeah.
When the caller, and here's the thing, is like he got upset, deservedly so, because somebody's calling him out. But at the same time, you make, like the call, you're making $11.5 million, and what we're seeing on the field isn't reflecting what you're being paid. When you make that type of money, no matter what you've done in the past, I'm in sales, but if I had a great year for 5 years, but then all of a sudden I have a terrible year, my boss is going to come to me and he's going to say, "Hey, what's going on here? What are we doing? Like, this is what you've done in the past.
Yeah.
Why aren't we seeing that now?"
Well, my thing is like the question went on for like 2.5, 3 minutes.
That's one of those things where you get a call-in show and people just ramble because they like being on air.
But my thing is, there's a way he could ask that question in I won't say respectful way,
right,
but it's like, okay, listen, clearly the season's not going the way you wanted it to. What do you think has happened? You get paid X amount of money to be the head coach. Like, is there something that's happened, or is there stuff you're going to change? Yeah, I was on Dabo's side. I truly was, like,
for the most part. And then he lost me at the end.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is like a lot of people only listen to, or they only took the clickbait from the first half, and it makes Dabo sound good. And what he said was all true. He's been successful. They've won national championships. They've done, they've won the ACC championship, pretty much every year that he's been there. But also, you haven't won a national championship in 5 years?
Well,
you haven't been there in 2 or 3 years.
I think the part that stood out to me the most was when he said he's confident in his ability with the program, where it's at, and the way he leads it. And I think that's a concern on all Clemson's fans' minds, where he hasn't really embraced this new era of college football, where it's the NIL era, the transfer portal. And, I saw a lot of people tweeting at it, basically stating, this sounds like the same old day. Some people think it was staged because he goes on similar rants.
Yeah.
But I think the big concern with what I got out of that towards the end was it sounds like he's just comfortable with where he's at in terms of his coaching ability and his ability to run the program, and just not adapting to the climate of college football today.
He's confident in himself, but at the same time, fans have a right to question him. You get paid a lot of money. The hire last year, offensively and defensively, didn't work. So far this year, it's not looking like it worked. So as far as he should be confident, but at some point, what you did 5 years ago, 10 years ago starts to run out because no matter how much you've done in the past, it's still going to be a what have you done for me lately type of that's the type of sport it is. Nobody cares what you did last year. The Braves won a World Series in 21, and we were pissed off as hell about this year because nobody cares that you won 100 and some odd games. You lost in the first round. And so you're pissed off. Fans are pissed off because they expect more. And like we mentioned earlier, he keeps saying that they need to focus more on appreciation than expectation. But that's one thing I don't agree with. I think that you should always appreciate what you did in the standard. You created this now. You created the expectation. When you won national championship, you create the expectation to win another one. When we were in high school, we had a legendary coach by the name of Bull Lee. We won our first state championship, and he said, it doesn't matter if you win one, you got to win two. You got to win two. And they've won 2 national championships, but at that point, you've created the expectation. The fans didn't just create these expectations on their own.
No.
You as a program, as a coach, as a staff, the players, X, Y, and Z, y'all created this expectation, and rightly so. And that should be the expectation. It should be the expectation at South Carolina that the next year you win more, and the next year you win more, and then you eventually get to that national championship. That should be the expectation. So for him to be mad at fans about having an expectation, I don't agree with that. Him saying that they should appreciate what has happened in the past, 100%. They should trust him for what he's done in the past, 100%. Nobody cares that you got 2 degrees.
I think,
Nobody cares. It's great that you've been married 30 years. That's a great personal achievement. Doesn't matter on the football field.
No.
It's great that you have 3 sons that you've raised well. Doesn't help you coaching.
No.
All that back half of the rant, that's where he lost me, where he wanted to talk about, I went to college and I wanted to play football, so I went and did it. And I wanted to get married, so I went and did it. And I got 2 degrees. Doesn't matter, dude. Doesn't matter, dude.
I'm a religious person, but when coaches start quoting scripture, you know that something's happening.
And here's the thing is, I'm not saying I have the cleanest mouth, but when you start quoting scripture and then you call someone a dumbass or a smart ass right after that, like, you're, what are we doing here? And again, it was an emotional rant. He had it perfect in the first half. You lost me in the second half.
But I like seeing that from coaches, and I love when Beamer gets heated like that because it shows that they care.
But you just got to stay on topic.
Stay on topic. Don't
start reaching.
Don't hit on these different tangents.
That back half, that's when it went from a good reply to kind of an egotistical thing for me. It was more of an egotistical, where he's been hearing so much negative towards himself. It's almost like he had to remind himself of everything that he had done in his life.
Out his resume.
Right. It's almost like he had to remind himself, like, hey, I am this guy. Like, I've done these things on, within football and without football. And all those things are great. That he mentioned.
People don't care about it, though.
But people don't care, no.
And
he did miss a great mic drop opportunity because the guy mentioned that when he was during the national championships that he was overseas in the military and serving, Dabo's last line should have just been, and thank you for your service. Hang up the phone. That would have been the best mic drop.
I was watching Beamer's press conference last night, and I think it's Gene Sapakoff, or it may have been Phil Kornblue. But he's asking, I'm paraphrasing the question, but it was basically like, how do you, like the outside noise, like how does he approach it? And I mean, not put words in Beamer's mouth. He's like, I don't care. He's like, I don't care what you say. He's like, it's not like after we lose, I go on my phone and check and see what certain accounts tweet about it.
I think for Beamer versus Dabo is Beamer kind of took over a program that was struggling. And so it's kind of been, there's always been the negative comments the whole time he's been a head coach. Dabo had so many years of successes that it was easy to ignore the 1% of negative comments that he might have heard. But now that you're getting majority of negative comments, it's a little harder for him to ignore it.
And Dabo had a great point where he talked about it's the small minority that is the loudest, and you can say that about anything in this country. And it just echoes. It just goes out into the ether, and that's what people latch on to and talk about. And it's And Dabo did bring up a great point. I don't know how many coaches have live calling shows. I think South Beamer still does that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as. I think it's they call up or they call, ask a question, hang up. I don't know if that Tyler kid was on the call.
Most of the time, you're not.
When Dabo went on.
Anytime that I've done some call-ins before. Most of the time, even with like Barstool or something like that, you call in, you pretty much give your question to whoever. They record that and then just play it back, and then the host or whoever gives an answer. So
I watch this off topic, but there's a sports show that I watch on YouTube. It's called Crane and Company, and they do segments where they allow people to call in. And it was it was somebody talking about Alabama.
Yeah.
And he had to make the incest joke where he's like, well, we don't sleep with our cousins
right.
like they do in Alabama, and then hung up the call. But yeah, there's just some fans I think don't need a voice, but they have it with social media nowadays.
Yeah, I agree.
It's always stupid, but listen, I would much rather have a coach like Dabo or Beamer who actually care about the program. You can tell it bothers them the way the season's going. I trust Beamer. He's going to get us in the right direction, but he needs time. Dabo's earned the right to have time allowed to him to try to turn things around.
I agree. We'll make some picks here in just a second. Real quick, college football playoff rankings came out
last night.
Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, Florida, Washington.
Florida State.
That's my fault. Washington, Oregon, Texas, Alabama, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Penn State, Missouri.
It's top 12.
Yeah. Give your top 6.
My top 6?
Real quick.
Okay. So I'm going to start at number 6 like they do on ESPN.
Okay.
I agree with the teams they had 1 through 6.
Yep.
But I would have Washington at 6. I would have Oregon at 5. Washington did beat Oregon, but I truly believe Oregon is the better team out of the two. Washington's kind of struggled the past 2 weeks with Stanford. I forgot who they played the week before, but they just haven't looked that good. I think Oregon is a very, very, very dangerous team.
Yeah.
Florida State, I agree with being at number 4. I don't know. I'm just not sold on them just yet. They struggled against BC. They should have lost to Clemson. I'm just going off the eye test. I would have Ohio State at 3, Georgia at 2, and Michigan at 1. Ohio State's number 1 because of their strength of schedule.
Yeah.
Because they've beat Notre Dame, and I forgot who the other they've got better ranked team wins compared to Georgia and Michigan.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to go the top or 6, 5, and 4. I agree with Oregon, Washington, Florida State. You could probably flip any of those, and they'll fit in those 3 spots. I'm gonna say Georgia's number 3 because Brock Bowers being out.
They look good against Florida.
Yeah,
they look really good against Florida.
But so did South Carolina offensively.
I'm just saying that. I mean,
they're missing their best player. But South Carolina also has a terrible offensive line. Look good.
Oscar Delp looked good against Florida.
But when they play any of these teams without Brock Bowers, they're going to struggle. I would go Michigan number 2 and Ohio State number 1.
Honestly, dude.
But Michigan might be like number 10 because they might just lose everybody with this investigation before the playoffs.
Dude, honestly, I'm going to go ahead and call it. I'm going to have Missouri beating Georgia this weekend.
Without Brock Bowers,
Missouri's a scary team.
Yeah.
My thing is, I think they're okay without Brock Bowers because I think it forced them to. It sucks when a top athlete goes down like that, but it forces you to start going and get more creative. That's what happened.
You'll know this weekend because when it's going to be crunch time and you got to go to your guy and your guy ain't out there,
they still
that's going to be tough.
I mean, they got Missouri this weekend. They still have Tennessee to play. They've got some tough games remaining.
All right, let's make some quick picks real quick. South Carolina is the favorite, 15.5 versus Jacksonville State.
Battle of the Gamecocks.
Battle
of the Gamecocks.
Over-under is 54.5, 12 o'clock game on ESPNU. I think South Carolina wins this game. Hopefully you see a lot of positives. They need to win it big, though.
I'm not going to lie to you, man. I'm nervous.
Jacksonville State is not a slouch. They're 7-2. They've won some big-time games before against, D1,
they beat
Power
Florida
5
State a
teams.
couple years ago.
They beat Georgia Tech, I believe. So they're not a slouch. It's a good opponent to try and build some momentum without it just being a walk of a team. But I'm taking South Carolina.
Jacksonville State did lose to Coastal in September 30-16. I'm picking South Carolina as well, but I'm still nervous about it.
Clemson is the underdog by 3 at home versus Notre Dame at 12 o'clock. I think Notre Dame wins this game.
I'm going with Notre Dame just because their defense.
It's going to be a battle of defenses.
And they've got enough offense.
Right.
Their offense, more about their offense than Clemson.
Yeah.
It's definitely, if you listen to this and you're able to gamble legally, hammer the under in this game.
Yeah. It's definitely going to be a defensive battle, but I think Notre Dame has more offensive firepower to win this game, and Clemson just doesn't have it, especially against Notre Dame's defense.
Yeah.
So we'll see. And then if Notre Dame loses, Tyler from Spartanburg, go ahead and call in again.
And apologize.
No. If Notre Dame wins, Tyler from Spartanburg, call in and talk your junk, son.
I thought you said if Clemson.
Call in and talk it again.
I thought you said Notre Dame loses.
No, if Notre Dame wins, Tyler from Spartanburg, go on and call again.
I don't think he'll be calling. He'll probably be Jim from Greenville next week.
Yeah.
They're not letting anybody named Tyler call back into that show.
Exactly. But we'll see you next week.
Yep. Thank y'all.